December 19th of the year 653 AD. This statue is Pope Martin I of Rome. He believed something that nearly all Christians throughout history do not believe. He believed that Christ had only one nature, divine, as opposed to the settled answer from the church councils to this question, that Christ was both fully human and fully divine. Because of this, he was arrested and abducted by the Byzantines. Earlier that summer in the year 653, he was taken to Constantinople, put on trial for this belief, and spent the last 2 years of his life in disgrace and exile. December 19th is when the trial began. December 19th of the year 966 AD. This is the date of death for King Sancho I of Leon, Leon being a medieval northern Spanish kingdom. This guy's kingship is unique in that he had 2 different reigns. He gave up his throne in the year 958 to Ordoño IV. Ordoño, however, died 2 years later, which left Sancho back with this job again, until his death in 966, when he was succeeded by his son Ramiro III. December 19th, 1562, the Battle of Troyes in France. At least I think that's how to pronounce it. The French language vexes me to no end. This was the first major battle of the French Wars for religion. These wars were one of the major religions that drove the French Protestants, the Huguenots, out of the European continent. This is why Canada has so many French speakers, because the Catholics fought wars against them until they left. This battle was a technical Catholic victory, although, fun piece of trivia, the commanders from both sides of this engagement were captured. December 19, 1606. This is when the first English ships arrived carrying settlers to what would become Jamestown, Virginia, so called because the settlement was on the James River. This would be the beginning of what would become the first of the 13 original colonies that participated in the American Revolution. December 19, 1675, the Great Swamp Fight, or the Great Swamp Massacre. This was part of King Philip's War in New England. The New England militia, along with some Pequot Indian volunteers, went after a settlement of Narragansett Indians, because the Narragansetts wanted the whites gone. And though both sides had about an equal number of fighters, the result was hundreds of Narragansett killed, including children and other non-combatants, and hundreds captured as well. This happened close to what is now South Kingston, Rhode Island, and it has been called one of the most lopsided military engagements in New England history. December 19th, 1688. This is a little over a week after the Battle of Reading, England. This was during the Glorious Revolution. That is when England's Catholic monarchs in the House of Stuart, namely James II, King of England and Ireland, also known as James VII, King of Scotland, were deposed, and shortly after that battle he was forced to flee England. After this defeat, he would spend most of the rest of his life in France. He would attempt to regain his throne after this, as would more than one of his descendants in the Jacobite risings, but they would ultimately be unsuccessful. The House of Stuart will not again be on the throne of Great Britain. December 19th, 1741, this is the date of death for this man. He is most often known by the name Vitus Bering. His full Danish name is Vitus Jonasson Bering, and his Russian name is Ivan Ivanovich Bering. As you may have guessed from his name, he was an explorer and cartographer. He is the namesake for the Bering Strait and the Bering Sea. You may not have known he is also the namesake for Vitus Lake in Alaska. He in fact died on Bering Island at the age of 60. December 19th, 1776. This portrait is Mr. Thomas Paine. People who enjoy studying the American Revolution will probably know who that is. He is most famous for writing a pamphlet called Common Sense, which was passed around a lot during the Revolution, presented very numerous reasons for the American colonies separating themselves from Great Britain and trying to get independence. December 19th is not the date that he published Common Sense. This is the day that he published The American Crisis, which was another pamphlet of his that he wrote with the purpose of boosting American morale early on in the war. If you've ever heard the phrase, "These are the times that try men's souls," that was the opening line to The American Crisis. 19th, 1777. This was the start of George Washington and the Continental Army's famous stay at Valley Forge during the winter. This was a very hard time for the Army. The rebellion was almost crushed in its infancy. We very easily might not have had a United States. The Continental troops faced hunger, desertion, disease, and to make all those things even worse, a lot of the local merchants would not accept the Continental money. They would only accept the money of Mother England, who they were rebelling against. Yet somehow the Continental Army stayed together and continued fighting the British all the way until the Battle of Yorktown, where we kicked them out of America. December 19th, 1793, this is the end of the Siege of Toulon. This is part of the War of the First Coalition. The story of that war is France had a little revolution. Monarch was deposed, to say the least. The other European powers super duper did not like this, to the extent that they were willing to use military force to reinstate monarchy in France. And so we had a situation where the monarchists in France and their international European allies were all standing together against the French Republicans. However, the Republicans have a little surprise. They have a military leader by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte, who will certainly earn his fame throughout the next couple decades. But for the purposes of this battle earlier on in his career, we know him as one of the military commanders who took the city of Toulon from the Royalists.
December 19th, 1796. On this day, British naval leader Horatio Nelson engaged in a minor naval battle against some Spanish ships. This was off the coast of Murcia, that is a city in southern Spain, and this was part of the French Revolutionary Wars.
December 19th, 1828, this is Vice President John C. Calhoun, and on this day something he wrote, namely the South Carolina Exposition and Protest, is published anonymously. That article was a protest against the Tariff of 1828, and it argued that a state, South Carolina in this case, has the constitutional authority to declare that a federal law is null and void in their state, and in theory they could use this against the tariff. This idea led to the nullification crisis 4 years later, when the state of South Carolina that did not like that tariff nor the tariff of 1832 attempted to nullify both of those laws. The nullification crisis would be solved when Congress passed the Force Bill authorizing the president to use military force against South Carolina, and also when a compromise tariff of 1833 was passed. December 19th, 1848, this is the date of death for Emily Bronte. She hardly needs any introduction. She is one of the famous Bronte sisters. They are very well-known English writers. And Emily is the one who wrote Wuthering Heights. Emily died at the age of 30, and as fate would have it, she died just a few months after her brother. That is because she caught a severe cold at his funeral. She rejected medical help, not trusting doctors, and the cold advanced into a pretty severe affliction of the lungs, which ultimately did her in. December 19th, 1899, this is the date of death for Henry Ware Lawton, Major General, U.S. Army. He is a Medal of Honor recipient for his actions during the Civil War. However, he died in 1899 in the Philippine War. He was the first general officer in U.S. history to be killed in overseas combat. He died in Manila in the Philippines. December 19th, 1900, this is when the Parliament of France, to anyone involved in the treason trial related to the Dreyfus Affair. What was the Dreyfus Affair? Well, this man you see here, his name is Alfred Dreyfus. He was accused and convicted of leaking French military secrets to the German embassy in Paris. He was sent to exile in a penal colony, but in the meantime, a few years later, somebody else looks into the matter. After some investigation, it is found that the real culprit of this crime was somebody else, not Dreyfus. At that time, in 1899, Dreyfus is brought back to France for another trial, and he is ultimately exonerated. December 19th, 1912, what you are looking at is the passenger ship General Slocum, and in 1904, this ship had a little bitty disaster. It caught fire while on the water, resulting in over 1,000 deaths. Yes, this ship could fit that many passengers, and that's the number of people that were on board at the time. The captain of the ship, William Van Schaik, was convicted and imprisoned related to that. As a matter of fact, he spent 3.5 years in Sing Sing prison, famous prison in New York. However, on this date in 1912, he receives an official pardon from President William Taft. December 19th, 1915, this is the date of death for Alois Alzheimer. He was a German psychiatrist credited with discovering the first case of presenile dementia, which of course would come to be known as Alzheimer's disease. He died at the age of 51 of heart failure and kidney failure. December 19th, 1924, you are looking at a picture of Fritz Haarmann. You may be surprised to learn that Jack the Ripper was not the only serial killer who was not from the United States. This guy was a serial killer in Germany known as the Butcher of Hanover or the Vampire of Hanover. He is responsible for the deaths and sexual assaults of over 24 young men and boys. And on this date, he was sentenced to death. December 19th, 1941. World War II, this is the day that Adolf Hitler appoints himself as head of the German Army High Command. This is a milestone for the consolidation of his power in the German state. and his ability to organize the nation in a full-scale war effort. December 19th, 1945, this is John Amory. He was a British national. He spent the World War II years collaborating with Nazi Germany. What he did is he tried to talk British and Commonwealth prisoners of war into joining the British Free Corps, that was a Waffen-SS unit. The Nazis also did similar things with American and Russian POWs. The Russian Liberation Army under command of Andrei Vlasov played a significant role on the Eastern Front. After the war, he was arrested and he was back in British hands. He was charged and convicted of treason, and on this date, December 19th, he was executed by hanging. December 19th, 1946, this was the beginning of the First Indochina War. That was the French attempt to invade Vietnam. Yes, if you can believe it, before the famous American Vietnam War, the French had their own Vietnam War, lasting between 1946 and 1954, and even after the Americans left, the Chinese attempted to invade. So honestly, rather than keeping track of all the 20th century wars in this region, it might just be easier listing off the times during that century that this part of the world had peace. December 19th, 1967, this is Harold Holt, former Prime Minister of Australia. 2 days before this, he went missing on an ocean swim, and on this date, the 19th, he is officially presumed dead. December 19th, 1972, this is the date that Apollo 17 returned to Earth. After having landed on the moon, this was the 6th mission to the moon. The goals of this mission included various science goals rather than simply exploration. This mission even included multiple live mice. December 19th, 1974, this is the day that Nelson Rockefeller, yes, of that same Rockefeller family, was sworn in as Vice President of the United States. This happened because Richard Nixon, who was president before, resigned over the Watergate scandal. Nixon's vice president, Gerald Ford, then took over the position, and then Ford himself needed a new vice president. Rockefeller at the time was former governor of New York and a prominent member of the Republican Party, which made him a reasonable choice for the position. December 19th, 1984, the Sino-British Joint Declaration. This was a formal agreement between the UK and China regarding the status of Hong Kong. The actual legal status of it before this was a little confusing owing to the fact that it was acquired in 3 different parts at 3 different times. Part of it the British kept after the First Opium War, part of it the British kept after the Second Opium War, and there was a third part of it that was leased to the UK for a period of 99 years in the year 1898. Flash forward to 1984, more than 100 years after the Second Opium War. The new agreement is for all of Hong Kong to be made an autonomous state in 1997. And if you can count, that lines up with the end date for that lease. More recently, though, well, let's just put it nicely and use the British term, they hold that China is in a state of ongoing non-compliance with the treaty regarding their policy to the Hong Kong government. However, the UK is not willing or able to do anything about it. December 19th, 1986, this is the date of death for Karl Werner Dankwart. He was born in 1895 in Prussia, so he was destined to see a lot of political change during his life. He served in World War I, of course, and then he became a diplomat, played a significant role in bringing Germany into the League of Nations after the First World War, and he represented Germany when the Marshall Plan was getting up and running following the Second World War. He died in Massachusetts at the age of 91. December 19th, 1997, this is the date of death for Masaru Ibuka. He was the co-founder of Sony, a company whose products are in a lot of places. He died in Tokyo at the age of 89. December 19th, 1997, this is the date of death for Sarah Northrop Hollister. If you don't know who that is, that's kind of lucky for you. This was the second wife of L. Ron Hubbard, that's right, founder of Scientology. And she, of course, played no small role in the creation of that, right along with her husband. She died at the age of 73 in Massachusetts. December 19th, 1998, this is impeachment day for President Bill Clinton. He did not have sexual relations with that woman, or so he says. The issue in question here was not the sexual relations themselves, it was perjury or lying under oath. So, in theory, on paper, there is no legal problem with a president having sexual relations with a staffer in the Oval Office. However, there is a legal problem with lying to Congress about it after you've been sworn in. While Bill Clinton was impeached, he was not removed from office, nor did he resign. He finished out his term. December 19th, 1999, this photograph is the Space Shuttle Discovery. And on this day, it launched beginning mission STS-103. That was the 3rd NASA mission to conduct maintenance on the Hubble telescope. December 19th, 2001, this was one of the most eventful days during the December riots in Argentina. These riots happened as a result of a financial crisis, and among other things, they resulted in several Argentine presidents, one after the other, resigning their position. December 19th, 2008, this is the date of death for Carol Chomsky. She was the wife of Noam Chomsky, and both of them were experts in childhood psychology, brain development in children, and she in particular was an expert in language acquisition in children. Her husband in particular contributed a lot to the study of childhood psychology. December 19th, 2009, this is the date of death for Kim Peek. He was known as a mega savant, and he was the inspiration for the character in the movie Rain Man. He died in Utah at the age of 58. December 19th, 2013, this is the spacecraft Gaia, and on this date it was launched by the European Space Agency. Its mission was to do astronomical research, such as measuring the distances between stars, etc., and as of 2026, the mission is still ongoing. December 19th, 2016. This photograph is Mr. Andrei Karlov. He was the Russian ambassador to the nation of Turkey. And this is the date that he was killed by an assassin in the city of Ankara. Ankara being the capital of the nation, most people would probably think it was Istanbul. The assassin was an off-duty police officer at the time, and he was shot at close range while giving a speech at an art exhibition. December 19th, 2021, this is the date of death for Sally Ann Howes. She was an actress and singer. A lot of the biggest stuff she did was in the 1960s. Most people today would know her from the 1968 film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. She died in Florida at the age of 91.